Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Resilient Enterprise Power Room series Beyond COVID-19. I'm Survi Sharma from the Edgeworth marketing team and I'll be your host for today. Let me first start by thanking you all for joining the session today. And I can only hope that we're all keeping safe in these difficult times. So, of course, we all know that we've been hit by COVID-19 a while back. And since then, the world around us has drastically changed the way we live, work, operate, literally everything, right? And of course, major business functions, they have been severely impacted. And that, of course, includes the supply chain. So today we come together to talk about that how enterprises can focus on building a resilient supply chain to be ready for the future. So a few things before we begin. The session today would be recorded and it will be available for all of us to view later on Edgeworth's channels. That's our website and social media. And the way today's session is structured is that we will first have the speaking sessions, and following that, we will have a Q&A session. Of course, anytime during the session you have any question, please drop in a line to us. You will see the facility being available on your screen right now. We will take that question up after the speaking sessions are done. Okay, so now let's move on to introduce our two very esteemed speakers for today. We have Ankur Chaturvedi, who is the Head of International Supply Chain and Projects at Imami Limited. Welcome, Ankur. And we have Praveen Kombia, who is the Global Product Head for Business Applications at Edgeworth. Very warm welcome to you too, Praveen. So moving on, let's kick off the first keynote session of today, which is on cognitive connected enterprise, how it is the key to build supply chain resiliency. This is being presented by Praveen Kombia. I will, of course, now stop sharing my screen, and Praveen, I will hand over the rights to you so that you can begin your presentation. Over to you, Praveen.
Thanks, Survi. Let me just bring up the screen. All right, just a quick check. Survi, you can see my screen?
Yes, Praveen, I can.
Okay, lovely, thanks. Thank you for the invite. And again, thank you, Ankur, for joining us today. We at Edgeworth are delighted to host you as part of this webinar series of the Resilient Enterprise. A very warm welcome to all the participants on the webinar. Again, just chiming in my hopes and prayers that everyone's keeping safe and sound in these difficult times. Just to continue the introduction, so I'm Praveen Kumbel and I run one of the product lines at Edgeworth. So Edgeworth is a product subsidiary of the larger Infosys Corporation. And we are in the space of products in the automation, artificial intelligence, and applied technology spaces. We're very actively present in the supply chain space with products across, visibility, traceability, AI products that drive many of these, and of course, the futures and what we're doing on the supply chain network space, as well as on the buy side with a couple of products there. But I think today it's not as much about what we do at Edgeworth, but also what we're seeing, what's happening globally, and how the supply chain has been impacted, and what is our point of view to see how we can become a more resilient enterprise, more resilient supply chain. We also want to hear then from Ankur on stories, and we spend some time chatting about some other matters. So then if I just keep going ahead. So if you look at some of the industry dynamics, many of you are from the industry, so you obviously see some of these mega trends, but the product explosion has been significant. We've just gone through the roof in the number of new products being launched, and that's just because people are trying to get more personalized and trying more outreach, right? We also see a significant movement to online commerce, fantastic growth rates there globally, and of course in India as well. So India itself, was of the $700 billion in trade approximately $40 billion happening online. This was the 2018 numbers. But by 2024, it's expected to get to about $1 trillion in overall trade, and significant CAGR growth on what's going to happen in e-commerce. So there's clearly a mega trend there globally, and it's just got accentuated with this entire event of COVID. We're also seeing, it's in this hyper personalization and product explosion and network and distribution explosion. Out of stock rates have not gone down. And clearly that's only going to get, and newer models on how you deliver and how you try and get more fulfillment, more personalized, are just emerging in the market. So clearly some industry dynamics that have been underway already, but have also got accentuated with this entire event. Why build supply chain resiliency? Again, I think many of you must be living through the challenges of current times in trying to make your supply chains deliver to customer demand, which is on essentials very clear, it's just skyrocketing, but on the others it's not. We were just looking at some data points, right? And there's some research out there, what S&P Capital had put out, and they were tracking some past events like the earthquakes or the trade war that was there between US and China. And the interesting thing was that there is obviously an impact. So supply chain impacts are directly on share prices and market capitalizations. But it's also interesting to see the recovery time, right? So if you're embedded in a region which has been directly impacted by that event, your recovery times are much longer as compared to some others like the trade war, which was less than 3 months. But let's look at COVID, right? COVID's been a global impact. And it's really very few markets that have been left untouched or not impacted significantly. McKinsey talks about the future lying in a more flexible supply chain, a more resilient one. If you see this impact, the impact of this event, we've seen trade volumes, transaction volumes plummet. And these are just regional comparisons between Q2 and Q1. Now, if you see, it's across the board in the Western Hemisphere, the impact has been significant. But it's interesting to see that by Q2, China was bouncing back because they had seen through some of the impact earlier. Now, hopefully, this is a good sign of trends to come, and maybe a quarter later, we see the bar graphs of the Western Hemisphere changing as well. But WTO believes that anywhere from 13 to 32% is going to be the impact. But look at the range. The range is so high because people just don't know. If you see closer from an industry perspective, this is again data from TradeShift, which is tracking the industry impacts. If you see the light gray, light blue bars for retail, those clearly have been the most impacted. Obviously, some of the essentials categories, they've done very well. In fact, have seen steep growths. But apart from that, if you see at an aggregate level, it's been the most significantly impacted industry. And that's starting to pair off now in June and July, hopefully. But clearly, the supply chain activity had significant drop in transaction volumes, particularly when you start looking at multi-country. So clearly, there is the importance of resiliency is not lost on any of us, and many of you are living through it. So what do we do about it? We've kind of tried to think of a point of view and saying, what are the approaches that you could take to react? So we kind of put it in a short, medium, long-term view. The first is obviously react and respond and just be nimble about it. And having things like great visibility to your entire supply chain obviously helps you react and respond better. The other is about recovering and then trying to navigate into using technology, focusing on operational efficiency or accelerating some of your IT efforts, digitization efforts, but really still using more of what you have, but trying to prioritize and pivot those capabilities into what's really needed to recover. And then the long term, you start thinking about what's the new operating models that have emerged. How do you innovate? How do you adapt? And we try to put down some aspects of what a resilient supply chain looks like, right? To our minds, it has the right digital tools, not just about reducing costs, because that seems to be prevalent to everyone, but it's also about enabling growth. Great insights across the supply chain, not just in pockets. Those insights drive planning. You also have the ability to de-risk and understand your supply base or your supplier's suppliers, kind of a tiered view, and identify the right supplier list, and truly have a digital foundation that helps you improve reaction times if such an event or such events which were to happen in the future. And by the way, they don't seem to be going down today, right? So to our minds, these are some of the elements of what makes the resilient supply chain. But if you start diving down further, we kind of put down 4 points of where we believe this levers and the impact needs to be seen. And the levers for us, to our minds, and these are our areas of biggest investments at Edgeworth as well. One is about access to granular and high velocity channel data. 80% of your supply chain data is not even within your organization. And just having the ability to see that across your extended supply chain, to track visibility, traceability, is very important. And while many of you, and some of you have responded to those questions as well, many of you are already starting to plan using end sell-through data. But really seeing that at the right granularity, at the SKU store level that you need, and seeing it at the right velocity. Even today, for many global organizations, having the ability to see what you sold yesterday at a SKU and store level today is still a North Star. It's not yet been done, right? So first things first, great access to high velocity granular data. The next thing really is that to use this to drive planning, to use this to leverage emerging technologies like artificial intelligence to drive much more sophisticated planning. AI is helping bring together the demand and the supply signals and try and bring that together in very optimized planning environments. And we see that as when we say autonomous, the concept is about saying it's not just manual interventions or planner interventions all the time, but can you really start making this more seamless and more nimble in how flexible that you can react to changes if you were looking at these insights on a periodic basis, on a high turn time basis. The third thing to our mind is about better visibility to your supplier base. And that comes to our minds in 2 ways. One is through an internal view, a good view of your spend cubes, where you're spending, what kind of suppliers, what's your spread, what's your geography spread, and so on and so forth. But also an external view on what are the market risks out there, what are the suppliers, who are the suppliers out there, what are their performance, what are their financial results, and so on and so forth. So a comprehensive view of your supplier base, not just direct suppliers, but suppliers, and that's something that we're trying to drive here. And really the true North Star for us is to create a cognitive connected enterprise, a cognitive connected supply chain, which is a true network of many players in the supply chain. And we are using digital technologies, AI technologies to really help drive this connected enterprise and use the data flowing through it seamlessly to drive insights that make it a cognitive and a learning enterprise, right? So to our minds, access to high-grade data, driving autonomous supply chain planning, keeping an eye out on the risk of your suppliers and your supplier tiers, truly bringing an end-to-end network into place are the 4 foundational elements of where we're investing for the future. How do you get there? To our minds, many people are driving a lot of data insights and visibility today, but to have it in a seamless environment across your supply chain, whether it's your distributor, third-party logistics, any of those players down to your retailers, is a great start point of getting that sell-side visibility. Driving your autonomous planning, a 360-degree procurement view, a supply-side view, together also helps drive that planning ecosystem. And lastly, like I said, this is the North Star for us to bring the manufacturer, distributor, logistics, transporter, supplier, as well as the retail together onto one common ecosystem, including a financial organization that's very interested in supply chain financing, is truly driving this end-to-end ecosystem. And there are a few paradigms that we're trying to get. By bringing all of them into an ecosystem, you're trying to create an environment, an experience layer that sits on top of your core underlying ERPs and systems of record that is disconnected. And when we say that it's different from that experience-led, it is about driving a better fulfillment paradigm. All those customers who are trying to get online or expecting much better service today in how they get fulfilled on either on the store shelves or in their homes are driving a behavior which requires your supply chain to be extremely nimble. And that ecosystem of understanding your inventory points, your supply side constraints, and fulfilling demand in a sometimes disintermediate manner, in a much better ecosystem manner, going directly to consumer as necessary. That is the whole network system that we're trying to drive. And we'll speak about some examples in, ahead of how we're trying to impact this and what kind of organizations are doing this globally. So that, to our minds, folks, is where we are headed. At Edgeworth, we're supported by some really great forward-looking, state-of-the-art technology assets and platforms like TradeEdge. So TradeEdge is a global platform. We have about almost $100 billion of annual kind of sales and inventory visibility that we're driving for 20 plus CPG customers globally across a very wide diaspora of some 130 countries and 5,000 plus touch points. And these are some of the client names that we've mentioned there, some of them whom are in the public domain. And we're also on the supply side in helping many organizations and enterprises drive better insights, better spend queue management, better tiered supplier risk management. And we're bringing together all of this in how we bring the whole network into place. So thank you very much. We just wanted to take some quality time upfront to share with you our perspective of how we see the resilient supply chain emerging and what might be the levers and assets that could be leveraged to make that journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen. That was very informative. Praveen, we also had very interesting polls for our audience. Do you think we should pull them out right now, or do you think we can do that later?
No, yeah, we can do that now as well, or I think a little later when we start talking about some of these specifics, maybe we could do that as part of the Q&A.
All right, makes a lot of sense. Okay, let me quickly share my screen again. Okay then, so now after this interesting session by Praveen, we have the next session that is a panel discussion, which is on embracing the new normal. We have two speakers, that is Ankur Chaturvedi and Praveen Kombyal. We also have Hormaz Dastoor from Edgeworth. He's a sales director for APAC region, and he has over 20 years of experience in the supply chain domain. He has worked extensively with multiple large enterprises. So I invite Hormaz to moderate today's session with Ankur and Praveen. So over to you, Hormaz.
Hey, thanks for that, Surabhi. And Praveen, thanks for the wonderful talk and for the insights shared. Ankur, as always, great to have you here. We have spoken before, and I think the knowledge that you would potentially share during the panel discussion will be of relevance and merit, I guess, to the entire audience. So let me start off first with, a question to Praveen, which just sort of popped up during the conversation that we were having. Praveen, you spoke briefly about, the importance of supply chain resiliency. Just so that the audience can better equate with it, could you also share certain key insights from a few of your customers, especially on the demand side of the value chain, and maybe play it back to the audience so that they're able to connect with how organizations have already leveraged some of these sort of benefits?
Sure. Thanks, Hormaz. So look, I think it's really time to talk through some examples. So I think one of our largest CPG customers globally was obviously in the midst of the pandemic, and was seeing huge, demand side out of stock situations in some of their categories across the board, right? As everybody went through it. And the interesting thing is that their recovery times were led by supply chain visibility that they had at a granular level. So this is one such organization that knows what they sold at a SKU and a store level today. And having that visibility gave them the ability to react, move inventory as necessary, seeing the demand signals almost in real time, and then move inventory to the right spots. And we were doing this study with them in the New York zone. And they looked at their out-of-stock positions, and they looked at some competitors that they had in out-of-stock positions of some of their competitors. And it was interesting to see that while both kinds of enterprises started off with pretty similar curves of those out-of-stock situations, but the ability for this CPG major to react given the visibility was such that they started pairing off. So anything from a 30 to 40% out of stock situation, they were able to quickly pair off to a 5 to 7% kind of range, max 10% kind of range in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And that curve between how they reacted to how the other CPGs reacted was a very interesting differential that they saw over a period of time, right? So that's just a great example of how this major was able to use that granular data and high velocity data to react quickly and respond to the environment. Closer home, I think one of our other customers in recent times had started down a journey of moving to kind of a multi-brand distributor environment. They started this journey. It was a pivot. It was a business model pivot for them to saying that they're moving from kind of exclusive distributors to multi-brand distributors. And we're obviously driven by the need to drive greater growth, new product lines that were available, and so on and so forth. And I think the entire COVID situation, what normally you would expect is that you would pause some of these initiatives, saying, you're not sure how this would see, but they just continued to accelerate because they realized that, back to the point, right? The growth is going to come out of this channel. And this is a time to make sure that that pivot is accelerated, in fact. And we added some 1,000 distributors in a 4-month period in the Indian market alone to help them, bring that entire distribution management system into place in a multi-brand kind of an environment and drive the adoption of their product line. So these are interesting observations that I've felt that how people have reacted quickly. But the consistency is all about saying, I'm trying to drive an insight-driven supply chain. And hence, whatever I have to do to get that granular high-velocity data, those should form the primary focus of my initiatives. Thomas?
Hey, thanks for sharing those insights, Praveen. Always useful to hear from real-life live examples. And I'm guessing it would resonate also with the audience that we have today. Both the scenarios, especially a dramatic drop in an out-of-stock situation, which is what I'm sure most people must be keeping their fingers crossed for. And also sort of evolving a new go-to-market route using multi-brand distributors, especially in times of a pandemic, to be able to reach your consumers faster, more efficiently across multiple touch points. Great stories to share. So thanks really for that, Praveen.
Actually, related to this, Harmas, is probably a good time to bring up that poll for our audience as well before we pivot to Ankur. So, Surbi,
Sure, Praveen.
The first question.
There, we just see it on our screen at the moment. How much time does it take to reconcile channel sales and inventory data and achieve readiness for decision making? You see 4 options on your screen. We've got the results.
Yeah, I think as the polling.
Okay. Yes.
So let's give it maybe 20 seconds more.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe 5.
We're up to about 19 or 20 votes, and it's pretty much all over the place. There are organizations which have the luxury of getting it in real time or within one day. So yesterday's sort of data available today in terms of what's actually sold out, what's available as inventory.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, there's also organizations which seem to be taking a little bit longer time to get those key elements back in for an analysis and a reaction.
Yeah, no, this is great, right? So the other way to look at this is that almost 60% of enterprises don't have that high granular or high velocity visibility. And that's clearly important from a demand signal perspective. So interesting. Thank you. Back to you, Harvis.
Sure. Thanks, Praveen. So let me put forward my next question to Ankur. Ankur, we have, over the period of time spoken about the impact that the current pandemic has had on Imami. Possible for you to probably share your thoughts on, how critical would it be for organizations like Imami in the manufacturing space also to be able to gain access to this granular channel visibility data? And by that, primarily, we are talking of, primary sales, secondary sales, inventory at various touch points. And probably elaborate on some of the challenges that manufacturers would face in emerging markets like India.
Thank you, Amut. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I must share some very interesting things which have happened in the recent past. Well, when COVID hit us, I always believe that supply chain professionals make a living out of a crisis. We are the guys who actually manage to keep the wheels running when things go wrong. And well, COVID is something which we never could anticipate. The level the crisis has hit us. Now, I will give you two examples. One is from the back end side, and one is from the demand side. Now, suddenly, when COVID came in about January, February, every market across the globe started asking for sanitizers. So, where we were selling or struggling to sell about 10,000 pieces of sanitizer in a year under one brand, we suddenly had orders for millions of pieces, and they wanted it in every brand. So, and at that time, supply chains from China were hit. Most of our manufacturing sites, which are outside India, source their packing material from China. So we could not source from China. So we decided that we'll start manufacturing in India and supply. We started production in India, and in March, the government of India imposed a ban on export of sanitizers. So, like the crisis manager I am, and with the urge to save my salary and my job, my team managed to look at alternate production sites. And we had a third party manufacturing partner in Dubai where we started manufacture of sanitizers. So once we started manufacture of sanitizers there, we shipped out all the packaging material from India. The government of UAE again banned export of sanitizers out of GCC. So second time we were hit. So we did the same mistake twice. So this time when we moved to Sri Lanka, we got into a discussion with the government, and we told them that we'll be exporting out of here, we'll be getting in forex revenue for you. And we made sure that they're not going to ban export of sanitizers. And then we started manufacturing in Sri Lanka. But guess what? Sri Lanka comes up with an acute forex crisis. And in the forex crisis, they ban import of packing material. So now I can't take packing material to Sri Lanka from India. And then, fortunately for us, Indian government allowed export of sanitizers. Now these are kind of things which happen, and if we do not know what is happening now, why this happened was because there was a shortage of sanitizers in the Indian market, and the government took steps. We felt that there would not be a shortage in UAE, but the government actually felt the shortage. So having visibility to data which is beyond my stock and my sales figures became very important. Another example is the current movement of Black Lives Matter. fairness creams for men and women are very, very popular category. Now, once this movement started, a brand called Fair and Handsome became an outcast. And this totally changes the dynamics. Now today you have Hindustan Levers and Imami fighting in court for a brand name alternate for Fair and Handsome. So these are kind of things which happen in supply chain in areas which are beyond just stock and the sales data. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, thanks for sharing those insights and those really interesting examples, Ankur. And I'm sure both these challenges must have completely kept you on your feet trying to figure out ways to navigate and still keep sort of the counter running for delivering the products and ensuring that they're reaching the end consumer. So very, very useful supply chain stories. I think we were also discussing about, within the COVID context itself, how the demand for Chavan Prash has suddenly shot up compared to sort of previous times. Possible to shed a little light on that for the benefit of the audience and how you sort of managed to tackle the upswing in demand?
Yeah, very interesting bit because the Chavan Prash again was a very stable product. It had a stable demand. I never had a problem about forecasting for Chavan Prash because it would always be static. It would neither go up nor go down. But with COVID, Chavan Prash has a very high concentration of vitamin C, and it is and other Ayurvedic herbs which make it a very strong immunobooster. And Chavan Prash, the main ingredient is amla. Majority of it is sourced from the wild. So it is not that when the supply goes up, I can suddenly source amla and make more Chavan Prash. So what we had to do was we had to scan our entire product portfolio, and in the entire product portfolio, any product which had even a iota of Chavan Prash going into it was withheld. Everything was diverted to Chavan Prash. And today we have countries like Saudi Arabia, where nutraceuticals, the normal time for registration of a nutraceutical in Saudi Arabia is about 2 years. And my Saudi Arabia distributor, he is telling me you send it, the government has exempted registration for Chavan Prash. So these are the kind of things which keep happening, and we need to be on our feet to handle them in real time basis. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, thanks for sharing that also, Ankur. So, basically, good point that you touch upon that, opportunities for sort of a sales growth or increasing product volumes could suddenly come up out of the blue from anywhere. And unless your back-end procurement side of the network is not geared up for the immediate ramp, you might essentially have to end up missing out on those opportunities because from what I believe, getting into the nutraceuticals market in GCC definitely takes quite a bit of paperwork and admin before you are allowed to sell your products there. And if you're now getting an open window where you can put your products on the shelf without the regulatory sort of oversight, or a limited amount of regulatory oversight, it would be a first mover advantage if you can get your product in on all the shelves, and then you literally have that market available for the next 3-4 years to you.
Yeah, exactly. And more importantly, what you rightly pointed out, being the first mover, this exemption will be there for a certain period of time. So if I can put my products in that time, I can take advantage. Otherwise, this is an opportunity lost.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Ankur.
Thank you.
So just to pivot from sort of the conversations that we were having, which were more around the specifics that we have seen within supply chains, Praveen, would it be possible to sort of shed some light on how certain new age digital technologies or artificial intelligence or machine learning can actually help bridge the channel visibility gap and maybe your personal observations about how you have seen organizations which have adopted some of these new technologies. What are the benefits that they would have seen?
Sure, Harmas. So look, first of all, Ankur, fantastic examples, right? True real world examples. And the last one is such a brilliant example of how you respond and how you can grow within such an environment by being nimble to present or to service an emerging opportunity. So great examples. So look, Harmas, to your question. So look, it's about technologies, and I find this concept of available technologies is like a hammer looking for a nail, right? So many global enterprises have tried different things to use these emerging technologies. But like at Edgeworth, we try to build very specific applications using these emerging technologies to solve for very specific problems in the value chain. So visibility is just one such thing that we're solving with digital technologies. But we're also working on using machine learning, for example, to drive harmonization between what the retailers are selling and the product master, and the information when it finally comes back, how it gets harmonized to product masters. So we've harmonized some 1.5 million SKUs today across so many categories on a consistent basis just by using machine learning. Otherwise, somebody has to sit down and try and get that information from the retailer to really make sense to the product master. And that's what the marketers and planners use for their downstream planning and information, right? So that's one example that we've seen. The other is we've been working on things like forecasting and suggested orders, and a lot of enterprise. And I've heard a couple of examples in, I think Ankur mentioned nutraceuticals, but some of the OTC products, a couple of healthcare organizations have been trying to work. A spirits organization has been working in India to try and do some suggested ordering, which is really something that you present into the SFA, saying, here's what I find as a pattern, and this is what you might likely buy. And then, promotions are targeted against that, right? Because that's where you expect your forecast. But here's this interesting case study when we were working with one of the other CPG customers in North America. And we were using some of these machine learning technologies to understand how their past performance of promotions have been. And if you look at it, what's classically known as post-event analytics, we found that despite the best intentions, for one of their key channels, which was a grocery chain, kind of Walgreen chain, they had a 8% stock out in the 3 weeks that they were running the promotion, where they expect for the store density, which was coming out of 60% of their, where 60% of their sales was expected to come from, right? So really, it's just a lack of the right data and insights. And you think you walked away from that promotion being successful. But then when you look back in time and you find these gaps, these then are patterns of data that you use to drive better forecasts. And that's where some of these emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning are helping drive better prediction, better granularity. Now, like Ankur said, something like COVID is an event. Nobody can predict around an event. But once that event happens, then your ability to react and respond faster and more meaningfully, saving bottom lines, saving some of those impacts, is really what you're trying to do with some of these emerging technologies. So we have some great outcomes that people have realized. 8 to 10% savings in out of stock situations. Uplift of 15% on promotion effectiveness. Case fill rates going up significantly. So there's plenty of outcomes. And at the heart of it is being very focused on what is the supply chain challenge, what are you trying to solve for, and what do you use these emerging technologies for. So don't make it a hammer looking for a nail. Thomas?
Hey, thanks for that, Praveen. And I think some very relevant examples, especially around promotions, considering that anywhere between 15 to 20% of revenue basically plows back into the channel as promotions. So anything that you can do to maximize your dollar or rupee return out of it for both top line and bottom line, that would obviously play a large role. What will also be interesting, I guess, for the supply chain professionals in the audience, would be the fact that if data is available further downstream, not just your primary sales, but even your secondary sales, and what are the levels of inventory being held across various touch points, probably supply chain could be a part of this, promotion creation team, if you may, to be able to really provide the right advice and guidance to, let's say, marketing or sales about what would the optimal way to run a promotion be to derive maximum sort of effect out of it. And that is something which sometimes does get overlooked in organizations where, if there's someone who's owning a particular brand line, they'll probably tie up with marketing and run a trade promotion without having a full understanding of, what's really available from a supply chain side. So I think thanks for bringing that point out. In fact, when you were mentioning primarily around OTC and the alcobev industry, one thought which came up to my mind was also around the complexity in labeling regulations, which we are seeing from time to time. And obviously, there have been challenges in complying with labeling regulations and brand imaging in India, and more pronounced in the EU market, where there are quite a few compliance requirements which brands have to go through. Anything from the portfolio which could help supply chain professionals better manage, let's say, the artwork which is going onto the brands or the packaging that they ship out?
Yeah, Harmas, that's a good call out. Actually, the use of vision capabilities and machine learning capabilities that understand images and are able to correlate changes, married to the regulations about what needs to be prioritized, what font sizes need to be used, what needs to be relatively focused, which one needs to be in bold. A number of those requirements, which differ by geography, by product categories, and sometimes, literally by markets, is something that we're using, kind of vision capabilities to do for. So what the AI does there is that it's reading out of the labels, it's correlating the regulations, and it's calling out potential gaps to the assessors, to the humans in the loop, to saying, these are the deltas that you might want to review. And as the specialists are overseeing and making changes to the label basis regulation, the technology is learning again, and that becomes a complete learning loop. So those are kind of vision kind of technologies. I've also seen this work nowadays in store visibility, right? So share of store shelves, they share there. So just taking pics and being able to learn from those and seeing that on a consistent basis as part of your store beat analysis is also something that is deriving value using vision technologies.
Hey, thanks for sharing those insights, Praveen. So, in fact, about store technologies, in fact, we've just heard that, in Malaysia recently, all the Kirana stores, all the sort of small mom and pop stores, they now necessarily have to have a camera installed at the shop front. And there are new players entering the market who are trying to now leverage those video feeds to be able to respond back to brands saying, hey, here's what we see being picked up from your shelf, and here is the frequency with which you need to replenish. So it's amazing how, something which is as ubiquitous today as a sort of video camera, if you may, can be used for different purposes also, and brands can leverage existing infrastructure to be able to drive better sales and supply chain planning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So thanks. My next question and there's a couple of questions here which I would like to direct towards Ankur. So Ankur, the first one would be that, over the period of time, yes, consumers have been moving more to online than physical. But during the current pandemic, there has been a significant shift in demand moving online rather than from physical stores. Specific to probably, let's say, the India and the Southeast Asia markets, how should manufacturers maybe plan to address such disruptions in consumer behavior?
Thank you, Amrut. Well, I'll just take it a step further. It's not just the channel, it is also the SKU which matters. Like if you see the lockdowns made sure all the roadside stores, they absolutely shut down.
Yeah.
So now if I look at the industry which is the snack industry, something where there are small 5 rupee and 10 rupee packs which were sold in all these roadside stalls, which contributed to the major bulk of business. Now, because of COVID, all that dried up and online selling started. Like you rightly said, people started buying online, and when you're buying online, you start buying bigger packs. Now, the same even with us for all our smaller packs, which were actually driven. Like if you look at something like a pain balm, we had SKUs of 1 ml and 2 ml,
Right.
which people would buy. If you're having a headache, you buy a small dippy, put that ointment a couple of times, because you don't want to keep that bottle with you unless you are a patient of migraine. Now those small SKU volumes just disappeared and they do not sell online. When people were buying online, they wanted bigger and bigger packs. And for a company like ours, our reach to online platforms was very limited. We never thought that anyone would want to buy our products or a substantial number, at least immediately. There were plans, but very, very long term plans. COVID forced us to move everything online. So we had to tie up with new companies. We had to connect like our depots with their distribution centers, their DCs, and then again moving material from our factories directly to DCs because quite a few of our depots fell into the containment zones. So these were the kind of things which we had to face. But fortunately, if you look at the overall scheme of things, uh, as the markets are opening up, the demand from the traditional channel is coming back. And surprisingly, the online demand is also staying up. It is also not going down. So that's a very good sign for business.
Oh, absolutely. That should lead to sort of much better sales revenue numbers for the year than to make up for the month's loss.
Yeah, probably we would not. Companies which are into the personal care and FMCG segment would not lose too much in the whole year.
Okay. That's good to know because that's probably what's driving the buoyancy in the stock market also.
Hormus, I just thought I'll step in here. There is a
Sure.
question to Ankur from the audience. If I may just read it out, Ankur, for you. How
Yeah.
resilient is the Indian supply chain, and what are the gaps that come to the surface where we need to work? So it's kind of a broader Indian supply chain gaps from a resilience perspective that is expected.
Well, I would say if you look at resilience per se in a very broad term, the Indian business environment is much more resilient than most others. We have seen in the earlier crisis of 2008-9, the Indian economy was not impacted as badly. And even if you look at COVID now, we are not as badly off as most of the others. So the key reason to this, which comes to my mind, is our inherent nature of finding a solution. And if you look at the supply chain per se, and again, that's a very tricky thing to say, but I believe it, so I'm saying it that at times not having SOPs cast in stone actually help you. And I think that is the key where what is a learning now that while you need SOPs to function properly, you need to have set procedures. You need to have flexibility to adapt as and when needed. And that is where Indian supply chains have done well. You also have companies in India who've been very rigid and they're sticking on to what they were doing. And you can see what is happening to them. There are companies which move on, which are agile, well, and you can see the difference. And if you look at India, I would say when I compare what we do in India with anywhere else in the world, the level of resilience in India is phenomenally higher. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for sharing those insights, Ankur, and good to hear that Indian markets have shown a lot more resilience and flexibility to be able to bounce back to sort of as close to business as usual compared to certain other markets that we have seen, where, like you mentioned, the rigidity of the processes is what holds them back from not just responding but even taking advantage of situations like this. So, as a last question, and Ankur and Praveen, I would like to probably direct it towards both of you. Ankur, towards you more as a business user stakeholder, and Praveen towards you as a technology provider. That for most enterprises, how can they actually start their journey towards building supply chain resiliency? Are there sort of any prerequisites, and what are the sort of caution points you would advise them to look out for on their journey? So probably, Praveen, could I request you to go first?
Sure. I was just going to smoothly redirect it to Ankur, but okay, I'll go. But look, so if you look at it from a technology perspective, what we're really saying is that make supply chain resiliency and the future forward will be about leveraging the power of gathering data, gathering insights, driving planning in a truly integrated supply chain view perspective, and then connecting on to being a part of networks, because that's what truly drives end-to-end consistent visibility and execution, supply chain execution excellence. And I'd probably take this whole end state or North Star, as we call it, as not something that is years away, right? We're working with a global enterprise who today wants, in a B2B2C environment, that if a consumer comes onto their site and looks for a particular SKU, they won't have the availability, they won't have the ability for a technology platform to help them understand the in-store availability, the stock availability in their warehouses, if not directly with them, because they're trying to go very direct to consumer, if not directly with them, with the other partner stores. So network-wide inventory availability, splitting orders as necessary if it cannot be fulfilled in one place, and then confirming back with logistic providers on what that optimal time to deliver might be. And to do all of this in an environment while the consumer is still waiting for a confirmation of order, which cannot be more than 1 to 2 minutes, if not lower. And that is the entire fulfillment paradigm that the network can well enable. So I think the end state of getting to that point is where we see technology going. And if you think of what technology will be used for this, it's state-of-the-art, digital, connected, truly on the cloud, SaaS platforms, using AI, using logics such as least cost to serve, bringing in logistic providers, etc., into the whole ecosystem. So that's where we see technology leading, and I think enterprises are already starting to see where they could go with this, and the consumer is probably going to start driving behavior. Parmas?
Yeah. Thank you, Praveen. Praveen, you beautifully covered the technology aspect. I'll just take a step back and go to the organizational aspect of resilience. Now, the first and the most important aspect of a resilient supply chain is data visibility. Unfortunately, most of the senior leadership does not want to get out of their comfort zone in terms of their MIS and reports that they used to reviewing. So any new set of data which is not relevant today would become relevant tomorrow is not noticed, and the youngsters actually struggle to put it up to their bosses. So I put it this way, that the intent for resilience needs to be from top down. The intent of resilience needs to be in the senior-most person in the organization. And the action for resilience needs to go bottom up, because by the very nature of the millennials and the younger generation in our business today and in our country especially, they come up with a lot of ideas and a lot of solutions which are not conventional in nature. And these are things which need to be put up, adapted, and analyzed. Having said that, the other point which you rightly pointed out about data, having data in real time. So as long as supply chain decision makers do not sit on the console and see real time data, resilience will be a distant dream. If I want someone to make the chart, prepare it, analyze it, and then bring it to me to make a decision, it cannot be done like you rightly said in a couple of minutes. The customer won't wait. Unfortunately, that is a legacy in quite a few Indian organizations where we are struggling. So if we have this intent coming from the top and keep the business resilience as a value of my organization, I think that is how it can be done in India. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Praveen and Ankur, for sharing your thoughts. That was really, really informative, and it's good to have sort of a view from a business user side as well as from a technology provider side, and see what's the best way to mesh it together to really get a win-win outcome for all the parties involved. So, in fact, I'm just doing a quick check on the time. I think we have shot over our segment by a few minutes. I'll hand it back to Surbhi at this time to sort of direct it towards the Q&A session with the audience, and probably any further polls if Surbhi might want to put up.
Thanks, Varmaz, and thank you so much, Ankur and Praveen. It was a really good session, especially the examples. They were very interesting to hear. So we do have one more poll question, and in fact, after that, we do have one more question from the audience. Let me just put up the poll quickly. That how would you like to embark on your resilient supply chain journey? You could either talk to an expert, you could either see a demo, or you could even read our latest thought leadership. All right, let's just give it a few more seconds. Okay, while this is happening, why don't I, in fact, ask the question? So, in fact, Ankur, the next question is to you, and Praveen, maybe you can also add in over here. So, Ankur, because of COVID-19, did you experience a shift when it comes to localized demand patterns? Every region has different lockdown rules or environment. So, specific to, let's say, regions within India, did you see any drastic difference? And if yes, how can that be managed or maintained better?
Well, this is a very catch-22 question for me, because now we still now don't have data from our retailers on a region-wise basis. So online sales make geographical distinction of actual demand very, very difficult. And even the retailers are not supplying from dedicated DCs. You could have a supply being made in Calcutta from a DC in Bombay, or a DC in Delhi supplying to something in Bangalore. So it's a very difficult situation to answer in the current scenario. But yes, in categories, in certain areas, the demands have gone up. Like to give you an example, uh, Chavan Prash was a product which would only sell in the mountainous regions in the north during this part of the year. But suddenly, once the lockdown has opened, we have demand for Chavan Prash from the entire country. So that's what is changing. Another thing which is going up is the consumption of balms, the Jaddu balm, the Mentho Plus balms in hot areas, because balms were never consumed in hot areas. So that these are two things which have happened post COVID.
All right. Praveen, would you like to add, like, how can maybe enterprises manage something like this?
Yeah, thanks, yeah. And I'll chime in really that, like Ankur said, and the question was, are you seeing more localized demand? I think Ankur responded from an India perspective, but I think we're also seeing this globally. And particularly, we are seeing in some categories. So, for example, one of the other customers that we're working with on the supply side, they have a very large spend base and a very large tail spend management spend base. And they have distilled out what amongst those are critical categories that they need to really pay some attention to, because there could be some important supplies in there. And then they have tried to do a tiered supply analysis, saying, okay, can I do some alternate supplier base? Can I quickly build some alternate suppliers for those specific critical subcategories, and try and go very local on that? So they have a spread across some 10 countries in Europe. They've tried to do very localized for each of those 10 European countries. So yes, I think, just in time to just in case is also driving a lot of this new thinking, and some of it might be very localized within countries.
All right. Thank you so much. We also have another question. I know we are already a little bit above the time, but let me just take this. So with the increasing business contribution of e-commerce in post-COVID scenario, any specific approach or method which can help in getting proactive action from SE to Eng to evaluate overall demand for business? So maybe Ankur, would you like to take that first?
Not sure we have. I mean, I can take that Surbhi as well. Just
Sure,
in
Praveen.
time, in case Ankur comes back then. I think Praveen asked this question. So hi, another Praveen in the group. So Praveen and everybody, I think the point is also about saying, can you get better consolidation of demand and better demand signals in the e-commerce scenario? I think the good thing is that if you're moving to if some of your demand is coming through an e-commerce scenario, the digital footprints of that request allow you to get better, more granular data about where that demand is emerging from. So with the right technology, you don't need to necessarily just constrain from a store level information of where that demand is coming from or where that order is coming from. But the digital footprint of that end consumer on an e-commerce scenario might well allow you to get the zip code of where that end customer is. And that's a very different perspective in how you can start looking at store clusters in where that demand summary or demand aggregation might be happening. So we actually think that the whole e-commerce shift is going to give us better demand signals in the future. And that's something that that we're proactively trying to draw into the platform capability itself.
Thank you, Praveen. I think there was some problem in my mic.
Sure, Uncle.
Thank you for bailing me out. But coming back to what you were saying, I'll give a real life example of a company that I worked for, which made teas in UK and Ireland. Now, UK, Ireland, Scotland is one of the largest consumers of tea in the world. Per capita consumption of tea is very high. But we were struggling with getting the right blend to the right people. So the tea is actually only one product. It is only the blend, the different ratios of different types of tea, which give you different tastes. So when we look at, so the solution that came up there was what you just mentioned. We started online sales, and online sales actually gave us a pattern of demand for a particular type of blend in a particular geography. And that was then translated into our traditional trade. So the particular brands, like you rightly mentioned, that we have the zip codes of a particular order. So we realize that this blend is doing well in this geography. So we put it in the store, and that's how this was planned. So e-commerce, of course, it was pre-COVID times, but even then, e-commerce was actually used not just as a selling medium, but also as a research medium for our on-ground strategy.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
All right, so great. So we are already over time, but we do have more questions. What we can do is we can, of course, get back to people separately about the same. I would like to conclude by the final slide, of course, that we have put across for all of you. And starting with, thank you so much for attending today's session. A very warm thank you to the speakers. That's Ankur, Praveen, and Hormas for moderating the session. It was a very informative, I think, session for all of us. We got to hear some real life examples about how to manage the supply chain better and be more resilient in these difficult times. We, of course, have a lot of thought leadership programs that we wanted to speak to you about. We have our thought leadership digital magazine that is Edge Quarterly. It comes out on a quarterly basis, and we have various articles from academicians, industry experts, analysts. We would love it if you could also participate in the same. And adding to that, we of course have a lot of other events. If you would like to participate in the same, do just write into us. Our email ID would be contact@edgework.com. In the meantime, do check out the Edge Quarterly's latest edition that is on this link. So that's it for today. Thank you so much and keep safe. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you to the audience. Thank you very much, Ankur, for joining us today.
Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.